Are you feeling hypersensitive, maybe very easily triggered? Have you recently come out of an abusive relationship? You might be stuck in survival mode. And today I want to talk about survival mode, and especially the survival mode that one it goes into during abusive relationships and situations. And I want to share my story a little bit about how I was able to come out of survival mode and what that did, and kind of what I experienced, during that time. Because I feel like if you're there, this is definitely gonna help you um, get out of it, move past it, and really start to be able to put that abuse behind you. Because when we come out of abusive relationships, but we're still stuck in the survival mode that it created, we're really just still stuck in the trauma of it. We're stuck in the triggers. We're stuck in things outside of us triggering that same emotional state that we've tried to leave. So for this video particularly, I'm going to share a view of one of my sunsets that we recently had. So I want to share this with you because nature has a very calming effect on us. It grounds us. It brings us to a sense of peace. And nature is really our medicine, and it really helps us regulate our nervous system, which is exactly what we need if we're trying to come out of survival mode. So survival mode triggers your sympathetic nervous system. Your body goes into fight or flight. That means that your blood is going to your extremities, your legs, your arms, to prepare you to put energy into your limbs so that you can either fight back, flee, or run away, get away from the danger. Our bodies are meant to handle little bursts of this, but when your life situation makes you live there, this can have major impacts on every area of our life. Not being able to focus, having digestive issues. Some people experience dizziness and appetite changes. These are some of the signs that you're in fight or flight survival mode. And all sorts of emotional and mental problems can also occur. I know for myself, when I would go into survival mode, I would go numb emotionally. It was kind of like a big door would just close and my emotions would turn off, my heart rate would go up, and I would instantly go into an emotionless problem-solving mode. My brain would only perceive that I was in danger and needed to survive. And becoming numb to any feelings in the moment felt like a blessing at times when I was experiencing the abuse, because feeling everything on top of what was happening was too much to handle. However, this means I wasn't processing any of it. And so those emotions get shoved down and then they get stuck in our bodies if we're not processing them. And if you've been in a prolonged situation where survival mode is almost a constant thing in your life, you probably haven't had the luxury of taking time later to process and release these emotions. Your body is used to shoving it down and leaving it there, and you've been shoving it down so that you can focus on a solution, on survival. So your natural mode ends up being survival mode, where you may have little gaps in between where you're not numb anymore. However, you're always on edge because there's always that threat of something bad. Your body never fully relaxes. Therefore, you're never in your parasympathetic nervous system, the mode where you feel relaxed, safe, calm. Living this way for so long and having all of these trapped emotions can also wreak havoc on your body. It can also set you up for being ultra sensitive to smaller traumas that can easily trigger survival mode, PTSD, and not being able to process normal life situations in a healthy way, even after leaving the abusive situation. This is how it keeps us stuck. So I want to share with you kind of my survival mode and mine typically had layers, and I would love to hear from you if you relate to any of these as well. I want to create a safe space here, so commenting down below. I don't tolerate any hate, any negative, lashing out, so please keep it very kind. But if you feel like you can share this, I would love to hear from you guys as well. So for me, with my layers, there was the lowest layer, which felt like the bottom of a pit. This was the layer I would go into when something really bad happened and I was switched into the most intense part of survival mode. My symptoms here would be emotional numbness, narrow focus on only surviving, and feeling like I needed to act or do something to correct or survive something. Then there was the middle ground. This is where I would spend the majority of my time, because when I was in bad relationships or situations, the intense abuse didn't happen 24/7. So parts of the day I would go back to feeling and doing normal life stuff. However, I wasn't away from the person or situation. Therefore, there was always the threat or possibility of something happening. And just a little thing, it just started raining pretty hard here, so I'm not sure if the mic is going to pick that up, but if you start hearing the little pitter patter, it's raining pretty hard out there. So, okay, back to the video. So then after coming out of and leaving these toxic people and situations, I started feeling a layer of safety that was pretty foreign to me. It was a very long time that I went through that I did not feel that level of safety. I remember the first night that I actually drove across the United States when I left my abusive ex-husband. And so I was staying in hotels, and it was a very interesting, every day that would go by, I would start feeling a little bit better and a little bit better, but I was still like driving across the United States and I didn't have time to relax. And I remember the very first night that I crashed on my friend's air mattress in his living room, because that was the only person that I had to reach out to, because my abusive ex really alienated me, even from my family. At the time, I was not even talking to any of my family, and people who know me know that the sister bond there is strong. I was at a very low point. But I remember that night laying on that bed and the realization that I was not going to have my ex come in and just start verbally attacking me. Usually the abuse happened in the evenings for me. And I just remember laying there and having this sense of peace it was so foreign to me. So at the beginning, it felt really good. I didn't realize that I had PTSD and all these stuck emotions until something would happen in life that caused my body to go back into fight or flight. And the things that were triggering me now that I had left the abuse were less dangerous. They were less toxic than what I had been in, but it was causing the same level of intense survival mode. And I realized that to move past this and heal from my chronic survival mode, I needed to stay out of survival mode, even when something traumatic happened. And I made this realization when I was cutting the last toxic person out of my life. So I didn't realize this. Let me count the years. So I left, and then I ended up back in another, not as bad, but still emotionally abusive relationship thing. So once I left that, it was like a couple years after leaving the abusive, emotionally abusive and verbally abusive relationships that I became conscious of this. So like going back to this, so I was no longer in the abusive relationships, but other types of micro traumas were still there, like any normal type of situation too, like needing to start over, especially when you leave an abusive relationship. Usually there's a sense of starting over. Some people leave the state that they were in, some people to try to get away, so the need to start over, figuring out what I was going to do for work, where I was going to live. And then, of course, there was all of this unprocessed trauma from the abuse I lived in, that I would get triggered by other situations or people. And it was very, they would be small things too sometimes. So I needed to become very aware and conscious of when I was triggered, and I needed to keep from going back into my normal survival mode. So the first thing was really becoming aware and conscious of when I was triggered. That feeling you get in your body, you got to become aware of that. And when things happened and I stayed out of survival mode, I wouldn't go numb, right? Because I'm keeping myself out of survival mode. So this phase can feel extremely challenging at times, because you probably aren't used to feeling everything if you also tend to go numb in survival mode, on top of dealing with the triggering situations. But this is truly a blessing as well, because emotions are energy in motion. Something happens, it brings up an emotion, and we're meant to process these emotions, to feel them, to allow them to run their course, to teach us anything that we needed to learn, and then to release them when we're ready. And when we do this with our emotions, instead of shoving them away and not processing them, we start to become more emotionally aware. We also learn stuff about ourselves, and by allowing ourselves to feel and process what comes up, my experience has been that I no longer dread intense emotions. I'm able to lean into them and get curious about what caused them and why I'm feeling them. And I always learn something new about myself. So in order to come out of survival mode, I had to start being very aware of my feelings, and whenever I was triggered, I would set some time aside to feel the feelings, to ask it questions, to get curious about what triggered it, and to validate those feelings. Even if the situation that triggered it was something innocent, it triggered you for a reason. So we want to find out what that was. Was it a tone of voice? Was it a facial expression? Did it make you think about something that happened in the past? We want to make those connections so that we can start to see what's triggering us. Because if we don't dissect this, it will remain this non-understood foreign thing that makes everything around us a possible threat. And from experience, this is a scary place to be, because we left the abuse, we want to be free from it. We don't want it to linger. Okay, so, and then we want to validate our response to it. So validating the feelings that we had, no matter how small they might be. One way I would do this was to tell myself that I understood that I felt this way, the triggered emotion, because of what you discovered about why you were triggered. Validating our emotions is so important. It's basically an alchemizing process. And my own experience with this was that these triggers started to become less intense. And in going through the exploration part of feeling your feelings, getting curious about what the trigger was, and then validating the way you felt, this helps integrate these feelings and experiences and helps you process what you used to shove down so that it can be released. So if you're still here with me, I would love for you to subscribe here. I think I'm going to have at least one more video on survival mode, but I also have an exercise that I'd love to do with you, that can have a huge calming effect when you are experiencing intense emotions or possibly PTSD when you're trying to stay out of survival mode. During times that you feel like you can't handle the intensity, this technique can become your new best friend. It's called the Havening technique or Havening technique, and I first heard about it from Paul McKenna, and I'll link it on the screen right here, but I'll also put a link in the description if you want to check that out. It'll really help you calm the emotional state. This was like a game changer when I discovered it, and I just discovered it a couple of months ago. So this was not something that I had when I was coming out of survival mode, but if I had it during that time, it would have been priceless. So the link is in the description. Please like this video if you're still here with me. If you're still here, I would love for you to just comment your favorite color heart emoji down below. I would love to see how many people stay with me and, get value out of these videos. So until next time, I hope this helped you, and definitely check out the Havening technique exercise.